Böhmer. He's an author of a book, The Major Who Outwitted the War. He's a journalist by profession and working for Die Welt.
First of all, Mr. Dr. Javed, and thank you all for being here tonight and taking the time to listen to my remarks. I must say that I feel very honored, but also very humbled by this opportunity because I know that I talk in front of many people who might know far more about the things I will talk about than myself, and that will also present itself to Pakistan. So what I will do in the next half hour or a little more than that is going to be a presentation in two steps, in three steps. The first one being I would like to tell you why I think this peace experiment, as I call it,
a large part of them come from the educated middle classes. And many of the key figures of militant Islamist ideology, as well as key activists of it, have actually come from very educated straight-up society and have had experiences with universities all over the world. And likewise, if you look at the Western side, Western chauvinism and ideas of superiority were never impenetrable to both of them. There's the risk of disregarding other parts of development. That unbelievable, at least at the first glance. Still wears dark blue suits and neckties every day. He has poached eggs and porridge. Now this is a little more progressed than I had planned. He has poached eggs and porridge for breakfast. He never speaks Kawar, the local language spoken in Chitral. Many of them will point to the example of Major Langland's saying that he made it under such adverse circumstances here. Many of us, many of those schools. And he also instilled a few principles in his schools and likewise in his students and teachers.
On border, which is the biggest ethnicity in Afghanistan and from which most of the Taliban come. But in Chitral you have Sunnis, in Chitral you also have Shias, mainly from the particularly liberal Ismaili brand, and you also have the Kalasha, who are an animistic people. It's actually the last non-Muslim people who are still to intentionally hold is actually the coexistence of many cultures and identities that seem irreconcilable in many other parts of this area. And there is one substantiated theory in science for how this kaleidoscope of cultures evolved, and that is that because of its seclusion, we have the highest mountains in the Hindu Kush there, because of its seclusion and its remoteness, Chitral over the centuries. Probably the reason really is that because Chitral is so secluded and remote, conditions there allowed for the constructions of particularly stable, lasting institutions, which would have been swept away by wars and migrations in other places in the Kush. And what you have in Chitral actually is the longest lasting statehood anywhere in the Hindu Kush. So if I take this together with the example of Major Langland's achievements there and the particularities of Chitral, which form of government they preferred. And here you can see the results. 38% Sharia, 32% military rule, 29% democracy. This made quite... I was also a bit shocked in the beginning. But if you take a second look at these figures, you see that actually the differences there are not big enough to drive most Pakistani youth. Then if you take an even deeper look, which the researchers of the British Council did, and ask for the reasons why.
City, Chitral, the area. And my question is that when we see on one side very peaceful area, on the other side we are looking around us are very disturbing areas, like Ukraine, Syria, and other areas which we can see today. So how do you suggest that a permanent peace can be achieved in this world? We are all
Possibly the biggest question that anyone here could ask. And I can't reply in kind. Can't give you a reply that is as big as your question. I can only tell you what my experience is, and that is that from afar, when I went there, everybody told me, "What, you're going there? It's horribly dangerous." I tried to project this to larger structures, but I think in the end, this is where you have to start. You have to construct.
Boys going together, one of them are Ahmadis, so you start beating them up. They have been growing up together all the time. So they know each other, they trust each other, they know each other's role, but it's more society under stress, and same around saying, due to the fact that it's remote, it's feared for violence.
Absolutely. Many traditional ways of resolving conflicts have led people to discover ways of living together, and it's more a modern condition, strategies new of Taiwan networks inside Pakistan to sort of rediscover sectarian violence as a new field of activity for the time after 2014, because very bluntly speaking, there are